Thank you everyone for joining us today. I'm excited about today. I'm excited about all of these. If you've attended some of these before, you'll know that this is not a vigilant sales pitch. We would love to work with you and protect your organization. But this is about us just helping to just bring some insight into what we're seeing, help organizations protect themselves. Our main mission as a company is to fight and defend others. That's literally what we're all about. And that is at all costs. And for us, this is one of those at all costs. It's to help educate people out there of what's going on and how important it is to protect them, but also that the methods and the protection and the trends that most of us follow just don't cut it. Now, I used to be a CISO. I used to be on the other side of the desk as a consumer. I am on this side of the desk because of what I experienced there. I experienced, as a CISO, the organization I worked with warehoused most of the automobile industry's data from financial and purchasing information, behavioral information for OEMs across the United States. And we got heavily attacked. And in those attacks, it wasn't the penetration tests that helped us. It wasn't our logging systems that rarely had information about the attacks, the SIMs. It wasn't our firewalls that stopped it. It was methods that our team was putting in place and looking at things different ways. And then I started to sit back as a CISO and go, why am I spending all of this if I'm not getting a return on my investment? What is all this stuff doing? And I really started digging into that and investigating. And we found that the security industry just is not primarily set up for success. And you can see that now. I mean, the IBM report came out a week ago or 2 weeks ago. It said that now, after $1 trillion more was spent by organizations in the cybersecurity industry, it's now almost 100 days longer for the industry on average to detect and contain a threat that's brand new. That's crazy. Right. And that's what I experienced as a CISO as well. And it's what got me in this industry. But it's one of the reasons why we do these webinars, because we want to give insight again from what we're seeing and help people understand more about how to protect themselves and keep themselves in business. Because right now, the stakes are a lot higher for you than when I was a CISO. I mean, yes, for what I did in my company and the data we stored, we could get hacked at any time, have that data stolen, and then it could take our organization down. 100%. But now, and this is nothing to be afraid about. It's something to have knowledge about, right? And if you've heard me speak before, I hate that people make decisions in fear. It is the worst way to make them, right? Think back over your life and all the times you've made decisions out of fear. It's generally, rarely ever a good one. And so determining how you protect your company and how you keep yourself secure is not something you want to do in the state of fear. And so, Vigilant has never been a fear-based organization ever. We're a knowledge-based organization. And so when you have knowledge, you then can take it and make decisions around that knowledge. So hopefully today brings you some knowledge around that. This is very interactive. It's very informal. Please pop questions inside the chat room as they come up. Pop insight into it. If you have anything that pops up, I will weave it into what we're talking about today. I have no agenda other than the fact that we end at the end here with a conversation with all of you that helps you, understand more about what we're seeing, and hopefully we can help your organization become that much more secure. So agenda-wise today, and I'll talk about this while I'm getting ready to share my screen. What we're going to do is I'll bounce back and forth between the whiteboard, PowerPoint, and talking as well, bounce into the questions also. We're going to talk about, we always start out, talk about, an attack. Today we're going to talk about 2 attacks we've seen in the last week. And it's just 2 of many, that comes across our doorstep. In the middle of that, so we'll talk about an attack first. We're going to talk about the CIS Top 20. And we'll talk about what it is. For those of you who've been here, we'll do a quick review, and we'll talk about a couple ways that organizations can protect themselves. Second to that, at the very end, we'll talk about zero login and just some of the things that's happening as it's coming out and what you need to know to protect yourselves. Because right now, it is a bit of the Wild West, and I'm just going to tell you that. But there's things that you can do to help get in front of it and minimize the ability for an attacker to take over your environment in the way. We'll talk about how that happens as well. So, all right, let's go ahead and jump in. So cool. So Greg and Ben and everyone, I tend to forget to stop sharing my screen when I go to the whiteboard. So if that happens, please feel free to let me know, and I will take care of that problem. So that's me. You know, again, in the industry for 24 years. I love our mission. I love what Vigilant does, and I love our team because they're focused on protecting companies. So, again, you know, one of the things when you're looking at cybersecurity in general, you have to determine what are you fighting for, and this is something to constantly ask yourself. This should be something that you understand from the C level all the way down at your organization to whatever level inside your organization. Everyone should not only understand what your mission is, but what are you fighting for within that? Because, you know, with even over the last month, right? Ransomware is up by 5,000%, 5,000%, right? A year and a half ago, right? There was a stat that came out that 60% of businesses in the mid-market will go out of business due to ransomware attacks over the next 5 years, right? We're seeing that happen. So again, don't take this with fear, but take it with knowledge. Know that you have an adversary and that it is real, and that the organizations that thought they were prepared when they first thought they could fight that adversary were indeed not. And you know, we talk about in this webinar, you know, why is that thought? But before you do anything, before you start any journey, you got to understand, what are you fighting for? So this is something, if your organization doesn't know this is the first step of cybersecurity. What are you fighting for? Because that will guide the decisions that your organization makes. So what makes, you know, and what's interesting too is cybersecurity can make your company more efficient. It can keep your organization in business. It helps your organization see the value of cybersecurity, and it's this barrier from harmful attacks. You know, so what are you fighting for, and really dig into that and answer that before doing any other thing with cybersecurity, because, you know, cybersecurity is not about a vendor. It's not about technology. It's not about any of those things. It's about mindset first and foremost. And if you get mindset down, then all the other subsequent decisions that come from that will be focused on the right path. So a little bit about us, just so you know who you're talking to. If you don't know us, you know, Vigilant, we're an elite team. You know, we understand and know warfare, especially from a cybersecurity standpoint. We have experienced cyber warfare fighters on our team, people from U.S. Cyber Command, Armed Forces, all across the industry. Our board of directors is comprised of special operations community members, as well as members from different global organizations around the world. We're one of 2 organizations in the industry that are authorized by the Department of Justice, U.S., for operating in CIS, so criminal justice environments, as well as law enforcement. We're the only company in the entire industry that provides unlimited instant response. So you'll find a lot of companies charging you know, retainers and things like that. The average incident response cost is $2.4 million. Our customers will never pay for that, ever, because we're fighting to defend them. We're with them in the foxhole. And then the last part of that is we do donate 25% of our profit to orphan care globally, and just started this year, actually starting to help fund some anti-sex trafficking groups. So it's, again, it's part of who we are in our mission. So enough about Vigilant. Let's jump into the CIS top 20. Actually, first, Cisco firewall attack, very actionable for anyone on this call that has Cisco firewalls. The concept is also very actionable for anyone that has a firewall. So before we get into CIS top 20, we're going to talk about an attack, and again, things you can do, just small adjustments in your environment that can help protect you right now. One of the things that we talk about in the CIS top 20 is that it's a framework of how to secure yourself. Now, what's interesting is that framework is driven by trending information. So basically, whatever happens in 2019 or 2020, right, will then be analyzed and trended, and then reports will come out at the end of 2020 that will say, this is what trended, and this is how to protect yourselves going forward. Well, that's crazy because a couple of reasons. One, it's trended information. It's in the past, right? Threat actors are smart. They don't always do the same things twice, right? And so if you're operating your security, your organization off of trended past data that isn't very specific to you, then you're at high risk because most threat actors aren't going to reuse those threats that they did in 2020. And two, when it's not curated to you, if you're the first attack point, then it's going to most likely be successful most of the time because no one else has seen it, right? So whenever you're designing your security off of trend, that's bad. So again, this is why we talk about things in the moment, what's happening now, so that way you can understand it. Now, this has been out for a little while, but it's just something that we've seen in the last week. Now, the CVE 2020-3452 is this idea, and I'm going to stop the share here and go to the whiteboard, that we've talked before in some of these webinars before, right? So you basically have a firewall, right? And most people are doing their detection in their firewalls because it tends to seem to be cheaper that way or less expensive, because if you can have this advanced next-gen firewall with all of the things happening inside of it, then that can protect you. And that's an interesting concept. It's one that was driven about 10 years ago by the industry because companies stopped wanting to buy multiple devices. And so, instead of buying an external vulnerability assessment tool or a IDS, intrusion detection system, or intrusion prevention system, and a firewall, they thought, the industry said, well, why don't we just combine them all into one? And by concept, from a cost standpoint, that sounds like a good idea. However, from practicality, fighting threats, it's really not. And the reason for that is because this firewall is just a server running an operating system. And that's it. Now, it has a very focused goal, which is to be a firewall, to be this doorway into your environment. However, it's just a server with a purpose running an operating system. And that means that there are vulnerabilities that exist on that box. Now, when we get to zero login, we'll talk more about vulnerabilities and patching and things like that. And it's actually our contention that that patching, although helpful, doesn't actually make you secure. And we'll talk more about that when we get to zero login. And we went into very deep discussion on that about 3 webinars ago. So we'll send out links to everyone today on that webinar because it really goes into this idea of patching cycles and how they really don't protect you the way you think that they do, and how you can use that idea in a different way to actually build security within your organization. So in this case, if you put all your prevention, right, and your detection in here, then in your firewall and at your doorway, one, when you turn on, and this will tell you in the documentation, if you turn on IDS or IPS, right, detection or prevention in your firewall, it will degrade the processing power and the throughput of that device. It's in all your documentation. So that should tell you something right away. If your primary focus for a device is to be a firewall and you add on these other services and it degrades it from being a firewall, well, we've just now cut the knees out from underneath the primary function of a device. And so it's these concepts that, we have to kind of look, well, if companies are getting hacked more than ever, right? And all these processes have been in place, are these things actually working, right? And I would say contending, some of the best practices out there, some of the trends aren't, right? And we'll show you why that is here with this Cisco attack that we're talking about. So basically, you have your firewall, it's open on the outside. So if there's a vulnerability against this device may not be able to detect it, right? The other thing is, if someone can take over this device, well, now what do they control? They control your prevention, they control your detection. They also are sitting on the spot where in most networks, all your networks come together, which means they now can have access to every network in your environment, potentially from that box. Or they can open up and create VPN tunnels and reverse tunnels, all kinds of things, right? Because they then now control the primary function of that system, which is the firewall. So in this attack, the CV score, in the email we'll send out, we'll actually pop that in with a link to read more about it. But what basically happens is this, an attacker can run a command against this, which is open, in an unauthenticated way, do a directory transversal attack. Now it's an attack from a decade ago, but it still existed on Cisco devices and did until a patch that came out in, I believe, July. And so all of the patching companies did up until July didn't fix this problem, which we'll talk about later. But what it's important for you to know is if you haven't patched your firewall since July, and it's a Cisco firewall specifically, then you are up against this threat. Now, one of the ways we saw an attacker just recently attack against it was it was a researcher out of Turkey, attacked in and tried to run this command and ran it against a firewall, directory transversal attack. Firewall didn't stop it. And the firewall actually didn't have all the information about the attack in it. Now we do, because what we do is we put detection around these devices, around your firewall. So if we do see something and it's invisible, passive detection here, so threat actors don't know it's there. But we were able to see all of the communications into that. But what it lets the attacker do is to get just get a listing of what is on that box. Now, it's pretty benign. It's not a massive attack by itself. But what it does is it allows that attacker to see what's in the directories of that firewall. Well, what could be an issue with that? Well, when you think about what's in your directories of your firewall, well, the first one that comes to mind is, file names, right? And if somebody can see the file names of the iOS, the operating system updates that you have downloaded to that box, they can know pretty well what version of iOS you're running. And that's now some useful information to an attacker, because now all they have to do is go out to Cisco's website, look at all of the things subsequent patches fixed, or go out to all kinds of vulnerability websites that will tell them exactly what your system is vulnerable to, and now they know how to attack it without that system detecting it. Worse, they could go buy that firewall, download that iOS, load it into that firewall in a lab, and then perfect their attack against that vulnerability before they ever attack you directly. So the very first time they're attacking you, they already have a playbook and they're ready to go. So ways that hackers can know that that is an issue is they can actually run commands against this box. You can do it against web servers, things like that, to see how long that box has been up. So if your firewall returns a code and says, hey, I've been up since January of 2019, right? They now equally know that, one, you're vulnerable to this attack, but two, you haven't updated your firewall since 2019, right? And your firewall will respond to that because it's how it's designed, right? So ways you can get around that. One, patch, right? Patch your systems, right? You just got to do that. And secondarily, if you can't patch your system, because there's a lot of companies that have change control windows or have to test a lot of things first, you can obfuscate that a little bit by just rebooting. If you're bound to where you can't patch regularly, or you can't patch without testing, or your organization won't let you push through a patch that is highly, highly critical. At least while you're waiting, don't wait just to patch, just reboot your firewall. That may seem simple, but this is why I said earlier, security is so much about mindset, and it's so much about knowing what's going on right now. Because then you can think creatively how to defend against an intelligent attacker, right? It may seem stupid to reboot your firewall, but it's not, because if I'm an attacker and I run those commands to see how long it's been up and it shows yesterday, well, I'm not going to waste my time because I'm going to think you've already patched. Now, if I really, really want to get in, that's why I said you can help a little. I may do a little more investigation. I may run some commands against it and things like that. But when you reboot it and now they know that it's been rebooted and they see it's up, then now they've got to guess with tens of thousands of different types of attacks to try to run against that box. And that's why if you really, really want to get in, they may be persistent, they may work hard at it, but if they don't, they're gonna move on, and it buys you some time to be able to patch. Now, the other thing that buys you time is having the ability to see what's happening out here, right? And so number A is visibility. You have to be able to see around your preventative controls. And you have to have it recorded. You have to have the ability to go back in time. You have to have the ability to create logs and investigate. And if you don't, you're at a significant disadvantage, because if you don't have visibility, or you're doing just detection inside these systems, or even worse, you're getting detection in a SIM solution that's being sent here to detect, well, now you're at a big disadvantage. And the reason I say that is because if I take over this box, all I have to do as an attacker is look at the config, see where it's sending logs to, and modify the logs being sent, right? So you have to have the ability to sit around your devices and protect yourself there. If you don't, you're going to lose this battle. And so, you know, with this right now, if you have Cisco firewalls, go do that. Go patch, right? It's an absolute issue right now with Cisco firewalls. If you haven't, you know, patched since July, you're susceptible to this and you can get hit, right? Second thing is, there are security researchers out there from places all over the world that are coming out and saying, hey, I just scanned your network. Here's a vulnerability, which is a really nice thing to do. And they want some money for telling you about that, right? So that can get you in a sticky situation, because when you don't pay them, then they may get mad at you, right? So just patch your stuff. If not, reboot and then patch your stuff. But absolutely get visibility into there. And that becomes a non-issue. The reason it buys you time, why visibility buys you time, is while you're waiting to patch, right? While you're waiting to patch, you can know without a shadow of a doubt, right, whether or not someone's trying to attack you and whether or not they've been successful or not. So great security buys you time to fulfill and implement great decisions. And that's a big key factor in that type of attack. All right, so let me, so we'll jump into CIS now. So let me share my screen back. And again, drop questions inside the Q&A. If anything pops up, I will absolutely tie them in. We're on this journey together today. If you're thinking that someone else is, probably as well, they may not have the desire to pop it up into a question, but please pop it there and I'll weave it in. It's really important that you all stay in business. So the CIS Top 20. Review for those that have been here. So I apologize. I know we got a bunch of new people on today. So I'll go through a quick review. The CIS Top 20 is a framework of 20 actionable steps that companies can take to protect themselves. A couple things it does for you. One, it improves security mindset inside your organization. It gets people thinking about security at all levels, right? It builds awareness inside your organization as well. And the mindset and awareness is really, really key. It also drives focus for an organization. And it's pretty cool if you do security well, because your organization gets wrapped around this idea. You know, when I was a CISO, I had to fight all the time to get things purchased, to get team members, to get the things that our company needed to protect themselves. And it was frustrating because my team was on the front lines and saw it, and I had to try to convince people that didn't that it was important. After I left that organization, about 5 years later, into Vigilant, my one of the senior leaders that sat around that C desk with me called up and said, "Hey, I'm sorry." And said, "Why?" And he said, "Well, because I never quite believed that you needed this stuff, you know, until closer to the end, before you left, because we just thought you wanted to buy cool tools for your team to play with." When he realized that I was really trying to save the company and keep it afloat, that's when things started to change. And the way we did that was we involved them in the conversation, and we used forensic data that helped them make better decisions, you know, and basically vote better, right, around that table. And that was pretty powerful. So it drives that focus so that companies are on the same page. So when you're considering deploying the top 20, a couple things. Deploying it well can overcome skill gaps in your organization, and also resource lag. It helps you identify regulations that you may or may not know you need to fulfill, and that can save you a lot of risk. It leads to understanding current events, what's happening today, so you can make really good decisions. And if you do this well, you can actually get very secure with spending very little money. So, you know, security, it doesn't, good security doesn't equal spending tons of money, right? It just means having the right mindset and making the right decisions. So does deploying the CIS Top 20 solve all your problems? No, it just gets that ship moving. All right, so where, and as another review for everyone, where can a framework become dangerous? One, if it becomes static. And so you want, you know, the approach to security in your organization to be iterative, and you need it to be iterative as in the shortest amount of time that your organization is susceptible. So for instance, if I know that, like just a very instance, right? The IBM threat report came out. In order to detect a threat, if you're using most industry-based technologies, it takes 315 days to detect a threat and contain it. So you have to determine, is 315 days a good iteration point for you, right? Does that fulfill your risk profile, right? If it does, great, right? But if it doesn't, you need to shrink that. So what I mean by that, if the technology or the decision-making tools or the approach that you're doing has to provide information, let me wipe this out, has to provide information that leads to decisions, right, that you can act on, that you can then verify. And that has to be short enough. So if you're determining on a backup solution, right, the repetition at which you test that backup solution has to be short enough that allows you to operate within a risk profile, right? So if you if your company can't withstand losing data for more than a week, right, then your iteration needs to be 1 week. If it's 24 hours, it needs to be 24 hours, right? And so you have to have this iterative approach to cybersecurity. And it's the same thing as you have to have quick information that helps you make these decisions that you can verify as you go through your process with cybersecurity. So, so it's kind of that OODA loop that I'm kind of talking to, right? You're observing, you're orienting, you're deciding, you're acting on what's happening in your environment consistently. So the top 20, we've already gone through 1 through 6. We'll talk about later on, we're going to talk about 9 and 10 today, but if you want to review some of those, we have webinars that you can watch that can take you through how to do that. Now, our approach to the top 20 is much different. As many of you know, a lot of companies will do this massive push towards full completion of these controls. What usually takes place is you spend a whole lot of time and a lot of budget money deploying it by the time you get done, the controls that people told you to do in the first place are sometimes outdated and you got to start all over again, but you've put this massive push. So for us, we just say, look, let's have small iterations through this top 20 list and just keep going back and through it, making small little tiny changes. And those small changes, just like I talked to you about today, reboot your firewall. That's a great step, right? But making these small little changes along the way that just iterate you through defending your organization, right? And what's interesting about the first pass through the top 20 is that if you approach it that way, again, you won't spend that much money. Most of it's small little changes, but the magnitude at which it jumps you forward in protecting your organization is pretty massive. The first section, which is basic controls, as we talked about before, these are the things companies do usually last. However, they are the most important part because it lets you know yourself so you can defend yourself. What people usually do second is what's in this foundational section. It's 7 through 16. And what that is are things more around controls. They're around actions to protect, things like that. What companies do first, which is actually the last thing they should do, which is more training and third-party testing, things like that, right? So for instance, going out and buying incident response plans and management. A lot of companies do that really early on. Now, it's not bad to have partnerships with companies that do that. However, if that's part of, if that's like one of the first things you do, that's not going to protect you from a threat, right? Even in the basic concept of that, it's not, you're basically buying, saying when we get attacked, we just want someone to show up, right? And that's what you're buying. Training, right? Again, training's great and awareness is great, but what's really important is being able to detect, all these attacks in your environment, all the things that are in that top 6, because with all the training that you can do, and if you look at statistics, over the last year, U.S. companies have done more cybersecurity training than ever. But yet, companies continue to get attacked and not know about it for 8 months, right? Because it only takes one user, right, to get through. And that's where zero login comes into play. So I'm excited to talk about it. But you want to start with things 1 through 6 first. They are the basic controls you need to have in place to protect yourself. Spend your money here. If you've got a limited security budget, don't spend it on training. I know that sounds crazy, but if you do this, if you do 1 through 6 well, you can do things like surgical training, because you'll know how you're getting attacked, and you'll be able to teach specific people how to stop behaviors that are constantly getting you attacked, right? Instead of the masses, all this stuff that doesn't really happen in your environment. So today, though, we're going to focus on limitation of control and network ports, protocols, and services, right? So, so let's check that out. And then the second one, we'll talk about data recovery. Now, these are going to be, again, small iterative things that you can just make decisions on today, right? So let me stop that share real quick. All right. So limitation and control of network ports, protocols, and services. So we're going to just focus on your firewall. This relates to your servers. We'll put them in there. Your servers, your desktops, right? Anything that receives information, right? And so what they're basically saying is, look, control what's open in your environment, right? Now, there's, ports, if you look at it, there's ports you want open, and there's ports you don't, right? Right? And so, ports you want open are ports that need to communicate in order to, do business. And there's ports you don't want open, which are the ones that may not necessarily be malicious. You just want to minimize access into systems. Because if a port's open, it can be attacked, right? So the thing, and this comes up in zero login, is that there are ports that you want open as well that can be used incorrectly, like they do in zero login. Now, the first part of understanding this, if you've implemented steps 1 through 6 well, right, about knowing yourself, the first thing is to understand, what software is communicating in your environment. And we talked about in the earliest ones is that you have software that communicates, it's installed and it communicates. And you have software that's installed and doesn't, right? And one of the things we talked about why that's so important is because if you have a piece of software that's installed but can't be communicated to, and you do a vulnerability assessment, that's in those back parts of CIS Top 20, kind of the last things you want to do, that vulnerability assessment can come back and say, oh my gosh, you have a highly critical vulnerability on a server. You need to fix it right now, right? And your limited IT staff is going to go do all kinds of change windows and fix software and all kinds of stuff, right? But if it's installed software that can't be communicated to, and the way to exploit that attack is to communicate to it, then it's really not a big deal in your environment. And even though a vulnerability assessment tells you it is, it's really not because of context, right? That's why knowing yourself is important. So you don't waste your time and you focus on the things that matter. Then you have things that are installed in communicating, right? This is where you want to focus your attention inside your organization. This is also where ports will be open to be able to allow that communication to happen. So if you do steps 1 through 6 really well, you do those little things we told you about to figure this stuff out, you're already equipped to do number 9, right? And number 9 sounds pretty simple up front, and it kind of is. You're basically going through your environment and you're just shutting off ports and access and things like that that exist and that are open. You're shutting off services that are open inside your environment. But the thing to know about that is that when you are shutting off services and ports, that your environment's not static and that people can make mistakes, right? And so from a shutting ports down, pretty simple. Do steps 1 through 6 first, learn about your environment, decide, right, what should be communicating and what shouldn't, and then just go shut those services down or shut those ports down inside your infrastructure. That's pretty simple on things you know about, right? Devices, your firewalls or servers or desktops. It's not so simple on things that you don't know about. And so where you have to be concerned are access points coming in or people bringing devices into your environment, plugging into your network. And you can deploy all kinds of things like network access control and have these massive programs to shut those systems down. But, just like we talked about in steps 1 through 6, if you have the ability to collect real-time information off of your network systems, right, then you're able to create a 24/7 map of communication in your environment, and you can start to detect some of these rogue systems that are out there that may have ports open or may allow for backdoor entries into your environment. One of the things that's really important is ports you don't know about as well. Now, one of the things that happens with threat actors a lot is if it's an external threat actor that's out here, and a system in your environment is either rogue or it gets malware on it, almost every time, right, that gets deployed, that comes out and creates what's called a reverse tunnel. So it goes to the threat actor through a known outbound port like HTTPS. The way your firewall works is it allows that traffic outbound, and because it's a request, it takes advantage of the fact of how firewalls work and allows communication to come back in, and it creates a tunnel that's encrypted that you can't read, right, into, that this system can then be controlled by a threat actor. And so that's a port that you don't want. So when you see some of these controls, don't just take it at face value, right? Yes, it's simple and easy. Limit your control of network ports and protocols and services and things like that by knowing what should and run and what shouldn't. But also be looking for things like this through network detection. Your firewall is not going to stop that, right? And it's going to allow it to go out and allow it to come back in. But have detection around this aspect of these reverse tunnels that can happen. Thanks. So second, data recovery capabilities. We got about 3 minutes on this, and we'll spend about 10 minutes on a zero login. So data recovery capabilities. And again, we're not going to talk about profound, I mean, they're profound little things. And that's what's kind of mind-blowing, is that if you just do some of these small things up front, security doesn't have to cost you money and be crazy expensive. What does need to happen is you just need to make these small step changes so that way you can overcome some of those problems. So data recovery capabilities, right? So ransomware's up 5,000% in the last 2 months, right? So we got 5,000% increase, right? It's something we saw trending back in June and kind of knew it was going to happen. And here we are. So with that, what threat actors are doing, and they've changed their tactics a little bit, is one, they take over your environment. Let me go to white there. They take over your environment and they shut it down, right? They just shut your environment down. You guys know this. Two, what they're doing now is they're threatening release. I didn't spell right, but there's no spell check on a whiteboard. So they're threatening release, right, of your data. So now when you get a ransom, they're saying, hey, this is going to cost you $20 million, right? Mid-market, you're probably going to pay 4 to 8, right? So you might have to spend $2 to $4 million to get a decryption key to get your data back. Then, if you don't want them to release your intellectual property out to the world, right, you have to pay another $2 to $4 million. So you have a choice with these ransomware attackers that are saying, hey, you can have a la carte. We can either release your data, or we can shut your, or turn you back on, or we can give you both of those and you have your data back. We don't release it to your intellectual property to the world, and everyone's happy, right? And they do that for anywhere between 4 to 8 million, right, for the mid-market, and sometimes tens of millions and more for the enterprise. A hospital last week just paid $670,000 to stop their intellectual property being released, health patient data, things like that, out to the internet. Now, so that's kind of what you're up against now. But this is where this is important, right? If you have great detection, you should be able to stop these early on from happening. But what happens if it does happen? Well, first and foremost, an expectation is, you just got to know this. We get asked all the time, are we going to be able to, can you get a decryption key and get our data back, right? In most cases, your decryption key is long gone. And by the time reverse engineering happens of that malware and the asynchronous keys used and everything like that, it could be years sometimes. Sometimes it's fast, sometimes it's not, but it could be a long time. And so first is this idea of data recovery. So what can you do right now to protect yourself? It's going to sound archaic, but this is what attackers do, right? They come in your environment. They manually, before they ever kick off ransomware, they find out where your backup servers are. So they get onto your backup server. A lot of companies are backing up to the cloud now. So what do? They corrupt the backup in creation. So when you're doing your checks on the front end and your check on the back end, it appears your backup's okay. Now they do that for the amount of time that you save backups, and they can see your backup policy right there because they can see what it's set to. So if it's 6 months, they do that for 6 months and 1 day. And so you end up with 6 months and 1 day of corrupted backups you'll never be able to use. They look internally to network-based appliances, which a lot of companies are using as well because it's faster to restore from. And they just work on gaining access to that. And it's not hard because most of the time, as your backup administrators log in here over the next 6 months, they just capture their credentials. They log into that box and they wait. And on the day that they strike, they delete your backups here. These are already corrupted. And the only way you have your data is on a file server or somewhere encrypted, and you have to pay them a key. So quick, easy thing right now, if you're not doing backups in general, go and do them. Just start that, right? But not even do it to the cloud, right? Because this is the most important device here. Get a physical box, at least 2, that you rotate. And you back up to that box and you unplug it. And it sounds archaic, but this will save your company's life, because they will take over this and they get in your environment and they will take over that. And if you have that physical backup offsite, and 2, test it. Test that backup. And there are tons of companies out there, and even you on this call today that might be going, man, that's archaic. That sounds dumb. I'm not going to do that. Companies that have gone through this wish they had. And so be on that side of that plan, because otherwise things can get really, really bad. All right, zero login. Let me share here and come down. And if you want more information or you want help with this, reach out to our team. Reach out to someone that invited you. You can get to us, like the guys here today, sales@vigilantnow.com. Just send an email there. They can get to us. Go to our website, vigilantnow.com. Fill out a form there for more information. In fact, we provide a security audit, no cost. From the date of first interaction with us, we give it to you for free for 30 days. After that, depending on the size of your organization, it can be around 7,000 to 9,000, sometimes even more than that. But we'll do it for free. And we'll give you a full security threat audit. And it actually fulfills, of the CIS top 20, 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, and 8 are the ones we talked about. It fulfills actually 82% of the CIS top 20 just by doing that audit. And it's free. And it takes about an hour of your time. That's it. So, and it's actually an on-site. We put our technology there. Our analyst team watches your environment for a week, and we can give you all that information. Now, zero login. If you haven't learned about this, be careful as you're searching in Google. There's a lot of hackers that have put up sites about zero login with zero login information. And if you go to it, you can get malware on your system, and then they take over your box, and then they go run this command. So be careful with what sites you go on. Another thing is, let your team know about it. Like your security teams, let your company know about it. Say, hey, we're aware of zero login, because they might get emails on it. They might hear about it. Just tell them not to click on anything around it, and don't search it on the internet. If you really want to help curb that, and we can send you some links to read about it as well. But send them safe links, and that can help. But the way zero login works, it's pretty simple actually, and you can carry it out pretty well, in these attacks, just on your own if you wanted to. But basically, there was this vulnerability. It's been around for a really, really long time. And that's kind of the idea with patching, is that patching only protects you from the attacks that are known and are fixed. It doesn't protect you from all of the attacks that have been around for a really long time. Last year, a major network provider had an issue in their routers for 8 months that allowed somebody to run remote commands unauthenticated, similar to this, and the router would run it. And it took them 8 months to fix that patch, right? To fix that issue. Microsoft released kind of quietly a patch to this in August. Patches that are unknown are very dangerous, right? Unknown to the industry, but known to threat actors, very dangerous, right? There's even a black market for it, right? Hackers will go out, find vulnerabilities, and they'll sell it. They're dangerous, but to a few, because they get sold, and then that one person that bought it uses it to just go wreak havoc. So this has been around for a really long time. It's not like all of a sudden everyone is now vulnerable to it, right? It's been around for a long time. But the issue is now more people know about it, and that's the real problem, right? So a lot more people are using it than just that initial group. And Microsoft released the update. Now, here's the problem with publicly released information, right? As soon as it's made public, everybody knows about it, including threat actors, right? So if you're buying public intel lists and things like that, they generally aren't worth much. because once it hits a public intel list, it's either going to be used against more people, or threat actors that really know what they're doing are going to stop using those because now they know all these security providers are detecting that. So in this case, you can run an exploit against an Active Directory server. Now, in order to do it, and this is where a lot of people are like, oh, it's not really that big of a deal, because you have to be inside of an environment to do it. So like someone's got to literally, if this is a switch, be inside of your environment on a desktop server to take over your AD box and run it. Well, it is a big deal because it's not that hard to get this user to click on a link, which is why I said, be careful what zero login websites you go to, because you click on a link, that reverse tunnel I was talking about earlier gets set up, a threat actor comes on this box, and now all they got to know is the host name of your server, which is easy to find, right? You can just run a command on this, and then the IP address of the server, equally easy to find, right? As soon as they do that, they just run it. And literally, in 3 seconds, it will take over that Active Directory box. And that's if you haven't patched, right? And so they released this patch. If you haven't patched, please patch your Active Directory servers right now, because this can happen. Any of your internal employees could do this right now. Anyone that's on your network. And so they run this command. It's basically just a script. You can go download the script from the internet, put in a Python script file, and just run it against the server, as long as you know that host name and the IP address. It literally just runs in 3 seconds, comes back and says complete. And what it does is it changes the domain admin password to null. And so what's interesting about that is now they have fully and completely taken over the domain. So what can you do with that? All kinds of stuff. You can add, remove users. You can lock people out. You can dump all the hash files, right? All the hashes on your entire domain controller. And now they have access to every password, right? Services, all kinds of stuff, right? And so it's pretty nasty. They can take over your domain, and anybody can run it in your environment. Now, has this been around for a really long time? Yeah, absolutely. Is it more of an issue now because more people know about it? Yes, because you're gonna have a lot of copycat people. And also the person that paid for this originally is probably pretty pissed off because now everyone's patching, right, and their investment, but they probably used it for a long time, right? And that's a pretty crazy thing. Now, what's interesting about this is, not a lot of companies out there, security companies, can detect it. Now we can, because of the way that we do what we do. We had detection for it fairly quickly. We were one of the first few that could. Unlike some of our competition, we didn't release that to the public necessarily because, at all, just because now threat actors then know how you detect, right? Now, the other thing to understand also is that, the easiest way to detect this is on the network as it's being carried out. But if all your detection is inside of your endpoints themselves, and that's it, then you're not going to have that early detection ability, right? The other thing is, and a lot of people think about this all the time, or don't think about this, but when you think about this attack, yes, can a lot of companies detect it yet? No, right? But even then, like, a lot has to happen before someone can do this, right? Unless they're an internal attacker. Malware has to get on a system. So your defenses missed it there, right? Then they have to create this reverse tunnel, and your defenses missed that, right? So then now they're attacking your AD box. So much earlier could this have been averted, right? At just here. And then bad things don't happen, right? So you don't just need to focus on the attack itself, but focus earlier in that attack chain, so that way you can stop things from even getting to that far. Because an attacker literally has to be in your environment somehow to be able to carry this out. Now, couple things to know about detection is generally most companies, you're starting to see more, but most of them still don't have really true detection for it. Now, there are some logging systems out there that can now detect it. But again, if I'm a threat actor, I can just change, and I already control your Active Directory server. It's too late by the time it gets to your login system. But if you do have a login system, it is good to enable it to detect. And so we'll send a screenshot of this out here. But if you go into your Active Directory system and you go into your advanced audit policy configuration and then go into account management, and this is not, I mean, this is on host. This is like the last place you would want to detect it. And that's why SIM products, it's behind it. It's behind the attack. You never want to be behind the attack. If you enable audit user account management, you enable audit security group management, and you enable audit computer account management, what you'll find is, if I go back here, is you'll see alerts that come out that say username changed. So that's alert 1, and you'll see anonymous login. So if you see usernames changed, that's not a big deal. That happens all the time, right? But username changed by anonymous login, that's the problem, right? So you can detect it in the SIM, right? If you do it that way, you can detect it in your login systems, SIMs, as well as your Active Directory boxes. However, just know, like, that's literally the last place you should be detecting it, right? You should have the ability to detect all the way through that path. If you don't, or you don't feel confident you do, please reach out to our team. We will literally do a free audit for you. There's no excuse to not know that with that free audit going on. If you're a customer of ours, we have detection to see that and can identify it. Please don't go running against your Active Directory boxes as tests. If you want to do that, reach out to our team and just talk to us about that first, because 1, you can really mess up your domain, but 2, you can open up some holes, right, in your environment, and you don't want to do that either. We can help you understand. The last thing I want you to know, and I know we're over time, there is one question here in a second. Like I said, more people will now use it now that they know about it. And so Microsoft just came out and as on October 5th, 6:35 p.m., 2 groups, one of them being named Muddy Water. So Iranian hackers are now using this to attack companies, right? And most, like you can read through here, a high number of attacks involved work with refugees or network technology providers in the Middle East. So just because you're not doing one of those things doesn't mean you're vulnerable to this or not. But if you haven't patch, but know that even if you patch, there are more of these just like this that are known by threats out there that are not known by the manufacturer. And you have to have the way to detect them when they happen, not once a manufacturer releases it to the internet. And that's really important. If you don't feel confident you can do that, please reach out. Even if you do feel confident, reach out. We'll show you whether or not the systems in your environment can or can't. If they can, great. You got a free audit. And I'll tell you, this audit report, way better than anything you're going to get in a vulnerability assessment report anywhere. If you're a customer of ours, log into our portal, vulnerability threat assessment report. It's on there. It's awesome. You get it every week. And you have full information of what's going on in your environment there. We just released threat severity levels as well. So you can get a weekly threat severity level right in your report. We're sending an email out to all of our customers today with some video walkthrough of that. Well, thank you all for joining us. Thanks for sticking over with us a little bit longer. Again, take advantage of that threat security audit. Join us again in 2 weeks. We're going to walk through the next 2. Watch some of the previous webinars. The one 2 webinars ago and the patch one is 2 of my favorites so far, just because they are very big steps forward in cybersecurity with small changes, and they're kind of mind-blowing, especially when you get into the patching one. And reach out to our team. We're here to help. We really believe in what we do, and we know that we can keep companies secure and in business. It's literally why we come to work every day. And so reach out and keep coming to these. If you have any questions or any thoughts about future ones, again, shoot it out to our team, sales@vigilantnow.com, and we'll try to incorporate those into what we're seeing. If there's any attacks or threats you'd like us to unpack and talk about in one of these, send that to us as well. We'd love to hear what you want to know about, and so we can answer it in it. So thank you again. Have a great day. Talk to you later.